All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. We're recording on the Wednesday for our Wednesday, April 5th episode, and that is episode number 84. So we're going to transition a little bit away from the free agency and a little bit to the upcoming rookies, this upcoming rookie draft here. So this time of year, it's a little bit fun because you can talk about and introduce the rookies. But a lot of what we're going to talk about here is going to, change based on how the NFL draft goes. So it's nice. It's a fun way to introduce the rookies and introduce the upcoming talent into the fantasy football world. But what we're going to talk about here, a lot of things can change in the next about give or take 3 weeks or so after we know a little bit more information about them following the NFL draft. But I really enjoy this episode, especially if you're a dynasty person like all three of us are here. This is a fun episode. So before we get into it, we'll say hello to all the fellas here and make sure everybody's doing good leading up to our big spring break here, and then we'll start talking about fantasy football. So starting things off here with Armand. Armand, what's been keeping you busy here? I know basketball season's officially winding down for you. I know you're volunteering there at Hoopla at St. Mary there, but how's things been keeping you busy?
Oh man, Hoopla was so much fun. I enjoyed it so much. It was a blast to see all that great basketball all weekend long, and it was just awesome. After that, what's been keeping me busy? Taking a little bit of time for me. I've been working out more than I've been able to with coaching football and basketball. Been able to dedicate a little bit more time to that, and letting my wife do her extracurricular stuff now. So she's involved in a play, and she's also dancing with the Ukrainian dancers here in Prince Albert. So I'm very proud of her and what she's doing with her extracurricular time.
It's awesome. Little give, little take, hey Armin?
Oh yeah.
Earn those air miles. Zach, how about you? What's been keeping you busy?
Nothing as exciting as Armin there. Just getting through one day after the other. With that light at the end of the tunnel being spring break here. So got another day here, another half day, so we can get her done.
Oh yeah, the light in the tunnel. I've been battling a serious cold all week, and it's just like, oh man, I can just see the light in the tunnel. That Friday's gonna hit, and just my feet are gonna be up on the coffee table, and a cup of coffee in my hand, and it's gonna be vacation, Jordan, for the next little bit. My wife,
the last one you get, bud.
I was just gonna say, my wife is she's due here at the end of the month, so this break will come, and I'll have about a week of work, and then life will change pretty quick. I guess really knock on wood, it could happen at any moment here on out, but things are gonna change soon enough. I'll be joining Armand here with the dual duty with babysitting and podcasting at the same time. Somehow Armand figures out a way to do it, but it's gonna be a good time. But more than definitely looking forward to a little bit of relaxation and getting a couple things off the to-do list for sure. Before we get into started here, we'll get to our 22 fresh quick question of the week out of the way, and we're talking a little bit about Dynasty and the upcoming rookies. And unless you have your head in a hole in the sand, you're well aware that the 101 this upcoming year, especially in non-superflex leagues, even maybe possibly in superflex leagues, depending on your needs, is going to be the 101, and that's most likely will be Bijan Robinson. I would be very surprised if it wasn't Bijan Robinson, but one of the greatest talents to come through the draft class in a long time. It really reminds me of the Saquon year, where it was nearly impossible to get that 101. So we'll talk a little bit about Bijan in the upcoming segment, but regardless, the question is, what would it take for you to give up the 101 in this upcoming rookie draft? Maybe we'll start things off here with Zach.
So I think we're all going to have similar answers here, and it basically comes down to that you're going to need a lot in return to give up that 101. On DLF.com, dynastyleaguefootball.com, right now, in startup drafts, he is the 5th player off the board. That is including all vets and rookies in the NFL. So he's being drafted as a top 5 player in startup drafts right now for Dynasty League. So I am going to need some serious assets to come back my way. Probably 2 top 20 players that are proven but young. Not looking at players like shoot, I don't know, nobody that's too old like Nuke or Dalvin Cook, for example. Those guys would be too old. I need young but still proven NFL talent. Probably two guys in the top 20.
Like a Chris Olave, does that fit the bill?
That would be one of them, probably. Yeah.
I guess I can jump in here. Armand, I know me and you kind of went a little bit of a similar route. I think Armand kind of, or sorry, I think Zach kind of stole your answer there. You can go first here. I think basically what he was saying was pretty much what you got written down.
Yeah, I changed it right as you guys were doing it here because I looked at your answers and this is what I originally wanted, but I thought maybe I was being too greedy, so I switched it to top 10 RB. But I went back on it and I'm saying I would need a top 5 RB and a top 20 wide receiver for that 101 spot right now because or you could flip flop that top 5 wide receiver, top 20 RB. Actually, no, if you're going top 20, if you're going the back end RB, maybe more like top 15, top 10 RB with that wide receiver, top 5 wide receiver, something like that. Because like Zach said, Bijan, he's already rated so high. The hype on him is real. And I have the honor of analyzing the RBs today, and I can tell you he is a talent. He is a talent. So
yeah, I put down the 102, a 24 first, and a top 24 piece, and even less writing that down, I was like, does that really still get it done? Like it all depends, I guess, what that 24 first is going to look like. But I guess you can answer in this question, I guess, maybe even put it into context. If somebody offered you Breece Hall for the 101. What are you thinking there? Let's go with Zach. Breece Hall or are you taking Bijan?
That's an interesting question because like Breece Hall, he's got to be in that top 7 startup value, I would assume. But and then you know what? Won't do it. No.
Especially
I was going to try to talk myself into it, but yeah, coming off that injury and no, not going to do it.
Okay, here's another one. I'll throw this one at Armand. Let's go with his name's escaped me right now. Running back from the Indianapolis Colts.
JT.
Taylor.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor or Bijan Robinson?
I think I'd go Bijan just because that receiving upside that he potentially has as well over Taylor. Taylor's kind of just a running back, but Bijan's got the receiving upside, and yeah, I think you would need more than just JT to get that done for me, I think.
So here's the last one, Zach. I'll throw this one at you. Christian McCaffrey or Bijan?
In redraft, you're going to probably take McCaffrey, but in Dynasty, it's got to be Bijan. McCaffrey's got too many years on his resume right now. Right now, that cliff could come this year, could come next year, but you're expecting Bijan to be 5 seasons, maybe 6 seasons, maybe. So, got to go with him.
But have you seen Christian McCaffrey's workout off-season hype video yet, Zach?
I have, yeah. I have seen the bunny hops and all the other obscure exercises.
Oh, it just makes you shake your head a little bit, eh? It's unreal. Yeah, I guess long story short, it's going to take a lot to get Bijan on your team. So we'll talk a little bit more about him when it comes to Armand's segment, I guess, or Armand's portion. Until then, we'll move into, I guess, a little bit of a thank you before we get into our rookie rankings here. Big thank you and sponsor read for Prince Albert Sorcerer Sports. They're one of the first couple places to jump on board and help us out with our Super Bowl party we've done the last couple of years and graciously have helped us out both times. Right now, I know it's a big transition away from hockey, basketball, and into some of our spring sports. I know you got spring basketball, obviously, but you got some volleyball, you got lacrosse, box, and field coming up. Baseball, softball, you name it, even golf now at the Prince Albert Source of Sports. So as we transition into a new sports season, find your way down to Prince Albert Source of Sports and find some awesome deals and even some brand new stock coming up on the shelves right now. I know I was just down there the other day. I got myself a brand new lacrosse shaft and lacrosse head, so I'm super pumped coming into the upcoming year. But they got more than just sports stuff too. They got unreal memorabilia. They've got great clothing, and they have a huge wall and selection of Yeti mugs and cups and koozies and coolers and you name it. So just about anything you need here in Prince Albert, you'll be able to get it at Prince Albert Source of Sports. So thank you very much, PA Source of Sports, and find your way down there, down in the west end of Prince Albert. So getting into our rookie here, I think the best way we're going to do it is we'll go from 5 down to 1. I think that's kind of the fun way to do it, and we'll kind of process elimination as we're going down, and we'll go 5th from one position, then 5th the next position. We'll kind of make our way down, and then we'll go 4 down, 3 down, 2 down until we get to our number 1 prospects from each position. So without further ado, let's start introducing some rookies.
Thank you all for being here, and for all of you tuning in across the country to welcome our future NFL stars. So if you're ready, are you ready? Let's get it started. The draft is now officially open.
Can't introduce the rookies without Roger Goodell. I think if there's a way I could try and turn it up on my microphone and turn the booze up a little bit louder, because I don't think it's as realistic as when he's sitting up there on the podium. But we'll get things going here. And the way this is going to work is we're going to have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to introduce our players. A little bit about them, where they're from, maybe some of their attributes and some of the pros and cons. So I'm going to start things off here. And my very first player is going to be from the quarterback position. I'm taking care of QBs. And I'm going to start talking about Will Levis. Most people have him maybe 4, depending on where you're at. And keep in mind, we're coming from a fantasy football perspective here. But Will Levis, he comes in at 6'4", 229 pounds at the age of 23, turning 24 shortly. Testing in not too bad in some of the demographics of explosiveness, vertical, and broad jump. Last season was a down year for Will Levis at playing in Kentucky. He completed 185 passes on 283 attempts in 11 games played, 2,400 yards and 19 touchdowns, but also had 10 interceptions as well. So a little bit of a down year in comparison to the previous year. Some things I really like about Will Levis is the athleticism and the arm strength. But a little bit about the negatives about Will Levis is the decision-making and the pocket presence is really poor. And one of the, I guess, the best comps I have for him would be like a Daniel Jones type, where he has the skills and the athleticism to get it done, but throws a lot of interceptions, a lot of turnovers, and just doesn't know where he's at in the pocket. Do I think he is a first-round talent? Not necessarily. But as you know, in the NFL, these highly rated quarterbacks can go quick. And if you look at last year, we look at Kenny Pickett, who is not necessarily one of the most talented quarterbacks and was one of the only quarterbacks in the draft, still went in the first round. So looking at comps and teams I think would be a good fit for Will Levis, I'm going to give him to the Las Vegas Raiders, who are drafting in that 8 spot. They're a team that is quarterback needy. And do I think he's a top 10 talent? No, I don't. Do I think he can have a decent career? Yes. But he's going to have to do some polishing on the turnovers. But for fantasy football, he's a guy that has a little bit of the upside on the rushing platform. But depending on what your settings are for turnovers, whether they be interceptions or fumbles, it might end up costing you a lot of points, because the thing we know about Daniel Jones is the rushing helps, but the last couple of years, the turnovers were really bad, other than this last year's. That hits 230 on the nose. Perfect timing for Will Levis. Moving into the next position here, we're going to head down to the running back position, and we're going to go to Armand at his number 5 running back.
Okay, before I start, I want to preface this with this one is really tough this year. I think there's 8 deep. So at the end of this, I'm going to give a few bonus names, just read off the names, not give any analysis on them. And like, as I was going through the last few days, like I had it, we're recording on Wednesday. Monday, I had like a list made of my top 5, and then I changed it again. So, ended up landing on this list, and at my 5th spot, which is actually my 6th, because my dark horse is actually my 4th guy, but he's such a dark horse. Nobody's talking about him that I wanted to keep him as my dark horse. So my fifth player is Ty J Spears out of Toulon. He is a speedy little running back here. He ran a 4.40 at the combine, so he has the home run ability. It was hard to judge him because he played for Toulon. He was clearly their best athlete, their best player. But that might also be what helps him in this as well. It's almost impressive how well he did last season and the seasons before, because he was running for a team that isn't that good. Some of the notes I saw about him with his traits are he's got good contact balance and burst. He accelerates through contact. Okay. So he's not a guy that when he gets hit by contact, you see him slowing down and then guys catching up. If he breaks the tackle, and he's going through arm tackles, usually he's not big enough to really plow a guy over. But when guys get an arm on him, they're not slowing him down. He's actually accelerating through that. And that really caught me there. I really like that trait from him and that home run ability from him. And he's pretty decent out of the backfield. He caught a decent number of passes for Toulon. He put up 256 receiving yards last year as a running back for in the college level is fairly decent, right? And he gets the job done. Some comps I put for him are Pollard, Jeff Wilson, Damian Harris, guys that are decent running backs at the NFL level, but they're not the bell cow backs and the workhorses that you necessarily need. But he's going to be a good NFL or RB, I think.
You still got another 20 seconds if you want to talk about Lamar Armand. That was well timed.
What else can I say? He's, like I said, it's 8 deep, and he was not in my top 5, but now he is, just because I was rewatching the film, and the way he accelerates through those arm tackles is really impressive. He doesn't slow down at all. I can't stress that enough.
Oh, sorry. Before we go to Zach here at the wide receivers, I'm going to preface this by every year, Armand does a really a big deep dive on the running backs, and every year I was like, oh, Armand, that's spicy. That's spicy. He always puts some guys in front of some big names, and even guys that have been drafted in the 6th round, 5th round. It's like, that's spicy, Armand. That's spicy. And then every year I come back to Armand's running back rankings, and it's like, he just knew. He just knew. So at home, I'm going to put some of the stuff out on Instagram, and you'll get a look at some of them as well. And you're going to think, that's a hot take, but trust me, check the tape and go back and look at some of Armand's some of his takes back in the last couple of years of these deep dives. He's hit these out of the park. Wide receivers, Zach. Let's actually, you know what, Zach, I was looking at yours here, your top 5. I'm not going to give any away, but you know what, for the most part, I like these a lot. So I have a little bit of a different order, but there's a couple that are outside the standard, I guess, quote unquote, top 5 of a lot of people are thinking. So let's start yours off here with your number 5 wide receiver.
Yeah, kind of like what Armand said. Just a quick preface. This top 5 is going to be characterized by guys that play in the slot. So if you keep on hearing me say he plays in the slot, that's kind of the overall theme for the top 5 guys, at least the top 5 in my mind. My number 5 player at the wide receiver position is Josh Downs out of North Carolina. Downs stands at 5 foot tall, 175 pounds. Both his size and his agility are perfect combinations for the slot role in the NFL. In college, he's posted back-to-back seasons where 80% of his snaps have come out of the slot. This season, he had 94 receptions, 1,029 yards, and 11 touchdowns. His routes are characterized with quick feet and polished timing at the top of his routes. He does lack a high-end speed, but that doesn't preclude him from playing outside a little bit if he needs to. He has had issues with drops, but he was also highly targeted, 260 total targets the past 2 years. So they didn't seem to sway the offense to go through him. One concern that I've seen a few people mention is he played with a highly talented quarterback in Drake May in North Carolina, and some people question whether he's the product of stellar quarterback play, whereas it wasn't all just Josh Downs and his ability. His RAS score compares favorably to the likes of Jahan Dotson, Rondell Moore, and Kadarius Toney from the recent years, or rather the recent drafts. And I can see Josh Downs going as early as the beginning of the second round to the teams like the Colts, who are picking 35 overall, the Panthers, his hometown team, 39th overall, and the Green Bay Packers, 45 overall.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan. Predominantly watch a lot of North Carolina basketball, but I've become quite fond of watching North Carolina football over the past couple of years, and he's a guy that kind of jumped off the paper, like Zach had mentioned. So, moving into the tight end position here, I'm going to bolster on the tight ends, and my number 5 is Luke Musgrave, and I'm just going to hold on. Sorry, I got to restart the clock here. Luke Musgrave, the tight end position is an interesting one this year because they're saying it's really deep. But for me, I think there is 2, maybe 3 horses, and then there's kind of a second tier where like there might be good, not great. But Luke Musgrave is an interesting tight end out of Oregon State, coming in at 6'6", 253 pounds, so quite a large tight end, and tested really well with an explosiveness rate, vertical and board jump, all being quite high in the 92nd, 92nd, and 79th percentile. So quite high. The only thing that's a bit of a knock for him is this last 2022 season, only 2 games played. And in those 2 games, he had 11 receptions, 169 yards, and 1 touchdown. The year before that, he played 10 games, 304 yards, and 1 touchdown. So relatively unproven in a sense, but coming in with a bigger body tight end and a guy that was supposed to make this big jump from the 2021 campaign into his 2022 campaign, but unfortunately was only there for 2 games. The Luke, like I said, he's a guy that I think has a lot of potential, but looking at his usage, going back to the 2021, 10 out of the 13 games he played, he had a 13% reception share, 14% of the yards for Oregon State, and then 7% of the touchdowns when he only came through with 3 touchdowns. So we're looking for what could have been in that 2022, where in those 13 games he got with 36% of receptions, 42% of yardage, and 41% of touchdown rate in those 2 games. So we had the potential to see this big monster jump out of Musgrave, but unfortunately, injury cut that one short. So a guy that I think could be a little bit of a sleeper, and a nice big stature at 6'6", 253, and relatively athletic at the age of 22. So a guy that you might be able to get later on in your drafts. Going into the next position here, I'm coming back. We'll go back up to, you guys want to snake it, or do you want to just keep going in order, quarterback all the way to tight end? What do you guys figure?
Just keep her going.
Okay, perfect. I'll just go back up to the quarterbacks here. So going into the quarterback position, I'm going into my number 4, and I think this is a guy that has been relatively slept on, and that's Hendon Hooker. The reason, there's a couple reasons I should say on why he's being slept on, but if we had this conversation before the conclusion of the season, or even a handful of weeks before the conclusion of the season, he was one of the front runners for the Heisman this past college season. But then tore his ACL, and now unfortunately has kind of plummeted down a little bit. A guy that was looking at, like a possible 3rd round draft pick, and even climbing up a little bit more now. I think honestly he's a guy that needs to be talked about a little bit more, because if it wasn't for the injury, I think he'd be somewhere in that realm of a top 5 draft pick. The one big knock against him is his age. He's currently 25 years old, which for a rookie entering into the NFL is quite old. But coming out of Tennessee in his final season, he had a completion rate of 70%, and in the year before that, a 68% completion rate. This is a guy that is pinpoint accuracy and can get it done on the ground as well too. He had a total of 430 yards on the ground this year and 619 yards on the ground last year. Not a rushing leader by any stretch of the imagination for the quarterback position, where they have some other QBs that can get a lot more done on the ground. But this is a guy that has that, that dual ability. Not super high-powered arm, but he has some plays where if you go back and watch his tape, it's just like really, really fun to watch. I know he had that one, I think it was like almost like a 360 throw where he went to throw pump fake and he was like spinning through the air and then he rolls out and he finds a guy in the back of the end zone. If I remember correctly, it's in overtime too. Really fun to watch. And if I had to try and pinpoint a team, I'm seeing a lot of mocks recently that this would be a lot of fun. Is the Detroit Lions taking him in the second round? And to be honest, that would be a perfect fit. It seems like they are a team that is out on the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes, but they are in a position where they have to roll with Goff for the next year, possibly two, based on his contract. And Hooker coming off of the injury is going to have to sit for a year regardless. So I think that's kind of a nice little fit. The other one would be like a team like Atlanta, where they're going to maybe see what they've got with Ritter, and then they can roll into Hooker maybe at the end of the season or this upcoming year. But the reason I like Hooker a lot more than Levis is with his pinpoint accuracy. It's tough to get rid of a quarterback in the NFL that is so pinpoint like that, where you have some talents, but you can't hit a guy in stride. It's easy to lose your starting position, but then you also come with this nice little rushing platform too. So like I mentioned before, if he was a guy that wasn't injured, he'd be being talked about in these rookie mock drafts a lot more.
The age thing there with Hooker is super interesting. I saw a tweet by a Patriot beat writer the other day that said Hooker is older than all the quarterbacks that were drafted last season, all the quarterbacks that were drafted this season before, as well as Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, and Jalen Hurts, and Tua, who were drafted 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's only 1 year younger than Lamar,
who's been in the NFL for what? This is his fifth season?
Yeah.
And
he just finished his rookie contract.
That's the thing. This guy, 25 years old, if he doesn't play for this full season, he's going to be playing his rookie year as a 26-year-old rookie, which that's the major knock on this guy. But he has a lot of tools that I think would make him very successful in the NFL. But the thing is, the quarterback position is not like the running back position. When you're age 27, your career is over. So you can still get 10 or 11 really, really good years out of this guy starting at 26. But it all depends on a lot of things. Maybe one major being coming back off the ACL injury. But that's one where coming fantasy season, especially if you're in a super flex league, he's going to be an interesting one based on where he lands. Like I said, there's situations where if he has to sit, that sucks for fantasy. You take a whole year without him and then hoping to step in the year following. But it might be what's best for him is taking that full recovery time, getting used to the offense, getting used to being a professional, and then coming in. So I definitely need to be monitoring come the NFL season. Next on the list here, we got the number 4 running back of Armand's.
All right. So my number 4 guy, again, preface asterisk, he's my number 5 because my dark horse is actually my number 4 here. But he started off my list, and then the more I watched this week and the more I looked into him, the more I fell in love with him. And I think I was a little bit trying to not be biased with him being Canadian, but by the end of it, I was like, I have to put him in my top 5, and that's Chase Brown out of Illinois. He ran a 4.43 40. He's 5'10", 209 pounds. He's a little bit older for an RB, but when you look at RBs, you also have to look at the touches, not just like their actual like age number. And he's only at like 600 touches for his college career, which puts him under some of the guys who have been the bell cow backs for their program for a few years. And that's because he really didn't start getting bell cow touches until this last year, and he took off. And he put up 1,643 yards and then 240 yards receiving. So he can catch. He's not like a catch machine like the specialist out of the backfield, but he can do it. He's capable of doing it. And then he's got great speed and agility. Okay. That is where he really separates himself. Is, as I wrote down, like, he has elite burst. He waits for the hole to come, or like he's showing this in the film. He'll wait for the hole and then he flashes through the hole. Like most guys, I say, like they explode through the hole and stuff like that. He flashes through the hole. Like once that hole opens up, it's instant acceleration. Like it is wild how fast he accelerates, and you can see that in his 40-inch vertical. That
Very
he
like
has.
Le'Veon Bell-esque, where it's like that patience, and then as soon as that hole opens up, he's gone.
Yeah, and it's wild. And like one of the resources I use, they have this like graph with like weight and 40 time, and Bijan is the best in the class for this, but he puts himself in a good spot on this graph and is like second or third depending on how you look at this graphic, and it, as far as athleticism goes. So he is super athletic. Like all the measurables are there, like the 4.43 40, even though it's not in the 4.3s, he's fast. Like he's a fast guy, and that acceleration is ridiculous that he has. And you know, he's not like a brick wall when he's running. He's not a run through guys type of guy. So like he's not great after contact, but he fights for the extra yardage. He's not afraid to get his nose dirty and get in there.
And the fact he's a Canadian helps too, Armand?
Oh yeah.
Going into our number 4 wide receiver here, Zach, you want to talk about your number 4 wide receiver?
So Quentin Johnson, my number 4 receiver, is the exception to the slot rule. Quentin Johnson is the prototypical height, weight, speed freak. And his size really sets him apart from the rest of the receivers on the list. He stands 6'4", 215 pounds. On paper, he is every part of the X receiver that you want at the NFL level. Looks like an absolute freak out there. This season, he had 60 receptions, just over 1,000 yards receiving, and 6 TDs. With his size, though, you are going to lose a little bit of the route running that you're going to get with the other receivers on this list. But he is able to win with his explosion off the line and his big frame, often boxing guys out for jump balls. He is quite talented at high pointing the ball. Everything you read about him, everything you watch on him, it all comes down to the same note on him, that he has struggled throughout his career with consistently catching the ball. There are issues with drops. Many of them seem to be concentration drops where he's seemingly open, nobody near him to knock the ball away, and he'll just drop a football. But he has the ability overall with his size and his athleticism to be the very best receiver, I think, in this draft class. But he could also be a absolute bust with his lack of route running and his inconsistent hands. His RAS score compares favorably to AJ Green, DK Metcalf, and N'Keal Harry. So just based off his measurables, he could be one of the best receivers in the league, like DK, or even with his athleticism and size, he could struggle and be holding on by a hair like N'Keal in a couple of years. Come draft, sorry?
That's draft pick 102 in Dynasty leagues, N'Keal Harry, by the way.
Yeah.
Add that salt in there.
Come draft season, I think he's going to be a first round lock. I would say a first round lock, most likely though in that second half of the first round. He's taken visits to the Ravens, who are picking 22nd overall. He's taken a visit to the Vikings, who are picking 23rd overall. And either yesterday or today, he took a visit to the Chiefs, who are picking 31st overall, the last pick of the first round, because the Dolphins were stripped of their first round draft pick. I could see him going to the Vikings because with Thielen leaving, I don't think it's safe to rely on JJ the way they have been, giving him close to 200 targets on the season. And I could also see the Chiefs taking him as a luxury pick at the end of the first round, where a receiver that they can build on. They have a lot of smaller, fast guys like Sky Moore and Tony, but now Johnson would give them a bigger body to go alongside Travis Kelce.
That's
I like. Don't know.
It's got to be a lock, Armand. The Vikings they're going to take a wide receiver guaranteed, whether it's him or not. Like, they're guaranteed to take a wide receiver.
I don't know, TJ Hawkinson, and I'm a big fan of KJ Osborne. So I'm not convinced it's a lock, but I wouldn't be sad if they took another wide receiver. I'll say it that way.
Moving on into our next position here, I have the tight end position, and in my fourth pick, the tight end position, I'm taking Sam Laporta. And Sam Laporta, if you're not familiar with him, comes from Iowa, also referred to as tight end U by a lot of people in the football community. A lot of the very premier top end tight ends coming from Iowa, and I think this is going to be a sneaky one. A little bit on the undersized for a tight end. He's 6'3", but comes in at a big 245. So not as tall as some of the other tight ends that I'm going to be talking about or have already talked about. But coming at age 22, and he was a pretty decent to upper end for all his testing, and especially very high in the 88th percentile in the board jump. Over these last couple of years, we've seen him come over 600 receiving yards. In 2021, he had 670, and in 2022, he had 656 receiving yards. Longest being a 58-yard reception in 2022. So being able to get some big yardage. The big knock against him was he had a total of 5 collegiate touchdowns, and not just in one season. A total of 5 career touchdowns. 1 touchdown in 2020, 3 in 2021. And then 1 in 2022. So for a lot of teams that look for the tight end in the red zone, this is not going to be the guy for them. But it's a guy that did soak up a large portion of receptions and yardage, as well as opportunities. So playing in 12 of 13 games this past season for Iowa, he took in 33% of the team's receptions, as well as 35% of the team's yardage, but only receiving a total of 15% of the team's touchdowns. So when you look at the fact that he had 1 touchdown and that makes up 15% of the Iowa's touchdowns, that kind of tells you what you need to know there. But I do like Sam Laporta in a sense that he seems very well-rounded, other than the big knock, like we talked about the touchdown opportunities. But part of this decision of why I do like Laporta is the fact that, like I mentioned, it's tight end U. Iowa has just historically pumped out tight ends left, right, and center, and who have gone on to major success. So looking at the fact that he's a well-rounded tight end and has this opportunity to have 600, 700-yard seasons, but then there might be some room to improve for the touchdown area. So I do like Sam here, and I'm have him coming in at tight end number 4. I'm going back to the quarterback position here and going to my QB number 3. And this is where things get a little bit interesting. There is this big discussion on who the top 3 is. And most positions, like the wide receiver, RB, and tight end, you look at it and you can say, okay, if they're good in NFL, they're good for fantasy. Maybe the tight end position and the RB a little bit different for blocking, maybe. Wide receiver a little bit, I guess, in that sense, too, for blocking. That could be really beneficial to their NFL team. But if they get yards, if they get touchdowns, those are good for, obviously, fantasy. But quarterback, there's this sense where they don't have to be a great NFL quarterback to be a great fantasy football quarterback. So those types of things were gone into my consideration of who I have in my top 3. Now, that being said, my third quarterback I'm taking is Bryce Young. And that is I could be, for some people, they have Bryce Young as their number 1 quarterback. And for me, he's coming in at number 3. So Bryce Young is the quarterback from Alabama, aged 21, turning 22 here shortly, 5'10", 204. And right there, 5'10" is one of the big knocks for Bryce Young as he enters the NFL because of the short stature, where the years previous, the one comp, I guess, was when Kyler Murray was being comped to Russell Wilson. Because Russell Wilson being undersized, Kyler Murray being undersized, a lot of people figured, hey, you know what? Not a huge issue. But now I was listening to another podcast where they were comparing Young to Kyler Murray and the struggles that Kyler Murray's had because of being undersized. But we've seen Bryce Young, be very successful throughout his collegiate season. This past season, he threw for 3,300 yards. The season prior to, he threw for 4,800 yards. We have a completion percentage in 2021 of 67%, and this past season of 65%. And then he does get it done a little bit on the ground, but that's not where he's going to come into that major success, only rushing for 185 yards on 49 attempts. That's not something we're going to see a lot from him in the NFL, where Kyler has that ability to scamper and pick up a lot of yards on that undersized. Bryce Young is predominantly going to be a pocket passer. Looking at guys like even Joe Burrow still got a lot done on the ground before his injury, but now is predominantly a pocket passer. So that's kind of what you're going to be expecting from Bryce Young. A little bit of concern, like I said, at that 5'10" stature, but he's as steady as it comes when you've seen what he was capable of producing at Alabama. That Alabama program, obviously being one of the best, if not the best in the country. And he was outstanding for them the last 2 seasons. So I imagine Bryce Young will be the number 2, the second drafted quarterback in the NFL. And I have him pegged going to the Houston Texans at 2nd overall. I think he is going to be an outstanding quarterback in the NFL. I have him, kind of along the lines of at worst, Derek Carr-esque, where it's at, reliable quarterback to have a long career, maybe not the most prestigious quarterback, but will have a long NFL career. And that's kind of where I have him at. Obviously more upside than Derek Carr as he's entering the NFL, but it all depends on how Houston kind of frames that organization with weapons for him to be successful. Okay. Next position here, Armand, RB number 3.
All right. This is where I get a little spicy here because this RB is widely considered the number 2 RB, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. He's 5'9", 199 pounds, and runs a 4.36 40, which is blazing fast. He's extremely fast, and he does use it, and he uses it in the passing game as well. My biggest knock with him a little bit is his BMI is a little low from what you'd want in a bell cow running back. He's a little undersized for being that bell cow, but I see the potential there. His frame isn't small. He could end up you look at Austin Eckler when he came out, he didn't look big, and now he is muscular and jacked. I could see Gibbs putting on a little bit of poundage to become that bell cow back, to be a focal point of an offense. But at this point, if he doesn't do that, I'm a little worried about him becoming more of a 3rd down specialist than he necessarily should be. That gets carries in the first 2 downs as well, here and there, but and end up in a committee. But he does have that potential to end up a bell cow. But it was just that little knock is what took him away from being my number 2. But him and my number 2 were real tight here. But what you got to say about Jahmyr Gibbs, besides his speed, is he's got a good leg drive. He continues to fight through contact, kind of the same as Chase Brown, though, where he's a little bit easier to take down than you necessarily want. It's not like he's continually getting through guys and getting those yards after contact. But he fights for it. And he's twitchy. A comp that I wrote down of what people are hoping for. And this is what I'd be hoping for if I got him. And I'm hoping that he does end up this is Walker or Eckler or Aaron Jones. And you know how high I was on Kenneth Walker last year. And I see that in him when you see him be twitchy in the field and try and break guys' ankles. I just don't know if he's quite at that level to me. What people could end up getting, though, instead is Michael Carter or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Devin Singletary or Naheem Hines, if you really want to go down, which are guys that have had good NFL careers. It's just they've ended up, they're a little undersized and they don't get the work that you necessarily want them to get when they have that talent in the receiving game and able to carry the rock competently as well. But hoping he ends up being being a Walker, another Kenneth Walker coming out this year, but I'm not fully convinced yet. I would put Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall ahead of Gibbs, but Gibbs is a great talent, and you'll be happy if you end up drafting him this coming season.
This is what I was talking about when I said that there's some spice. And you know what, Armand, I looked at it, I was like, this is spicy, but I like it. Like, I looked at yours, and I was like, oh, really? He put this guy in front of this guy, and obviously we'll get to there in a second here. But honestly, you're the guy you have at 2. Like, to me, the 2, 3 are almost interchangeable. It all depends on landing spot. But I really, really like your number 2 running back, like, a lot. So I'm kind of with you on this one, Armand. I think we might be a little bit on the contrary. Not the fact that there's like 2 and there's a big gap and there's 3. Like, I think they're kind of 2A, 2B in a sense. But
I agree with that. Like, when I tiered it out, I had Robinson tier 1 and then my number 2 and Gibbs as tier number 2.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So you're not alone, Armand. It's definitely seems spicy, but you're not alone. That's for sure. Let's go to Zach, your wide receiver number 3.
Wide receiver number 3 is Jordan Addison out of USC. Addison is quite possibly, the way I see it, one of the more interesting wide receiver prospects in this draft. Because of his size, he's 6 foot and 175 pounds. And that size, I think, is reminiscent a little bit of Devonta Smith from a few years ago. The only difference is the speed that they both bring to the table, where Smith was lightning quick. Addison has much more average athleticism. So I wouldn't be surprised if his size is a drawback on some teams' draft boards. Another reason why he's so interesting is he transferred last season after winning the Volunikoff Award for the NCAA's best receiver on the season. He had that breakout year in 2021 at Pitt with Kenny Pickett, and following that year, Pickett left and he transferred with a massive NIL deal to USC, where he was paired up with Caleb Williams, the presumptive number 1 pick in next year's NFL draft. Addison had a good season, a good but not great season this year at USC. 59 receptions, 875 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Interestingly, though, all those stats were nearly doubled the year before while he was at Pitt. So it was a down year statistically for Addison. But outside of the change of scenery, overall, Addison projects more as a slot than a outside wide receiver, due primarily because of his size, but also his lack of above average athleticism. His RAS score compares favorably to Devonta Smith, minus the speed, Jerry Jeudy, and Michael Gallup. Come draft time, I could see him going as early as pick 20 to Seattle, where Tyler Lockett has no guaranteed money left after this year. And the next 2 years are absolutely massive contracts that they need to get out of. They're at least that they should get out of. And I could see Addison slotting in as early as next year for Lockett. He's also taken visits to Baltimore as well as the New York Giants. Ravens picking 22nd overall and the Giants picking 25th overall.
I think the best way you phrased that, Zach, was super intrigued. I'm obviously a big USC guy, and USC has had a lot of success with wide receivers coming out the past couple of years. But keep in mind, like you mentioned, he was a transfer to USC, not necessarily a USC product. But his last couple of years, he's been on guys' radars for this upcoming draft, and I think he's a guy that, once again, if he gets that real sneaky landing spot, he's a guy that's going to climb up some fantasy draft boards real quick, I think.
And at this time last year, I think a lot of people were falling over themselves saying, like, next year when Addison's available, that's going to be a top 3 fantasy pick, a top 3 rookie pick. And it was just, a down year for him, and more tape that people have seen. And now he's kind of getting pushed back a little bit, at least in my mind.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that it's a really, a pretty decent, I shouldn't say really good, like in the past couple of years. We have a good wide receiver draft here where there's a lot of guys that kind of fit the same bill, like you've mentioned, and a lot of those, smaller slot receiver type guys. So I guess it's really, what do you like, and who do you want to kind of put your flag in for these NFL teams? I'm going to take care of the next position here, and I have my tight end number 3. And tight end number 3 here, this guy is a monster, and actually some people even have him pegged as their tight end number 2. But I have him as tight end number 3, and that is Darnell Washington, the 6'7", 264 monster out of Georgia. He's a monster. Was underwhelming in some of the testing scores, like the vertical and the bench press. But the board jump, he was quite high at the 84th percentile. So one of the reasons why I think Darnell Washington is kind of higher up on some draft boards is obviously his monstrous size at 6'7", 264. But the fact he was also paired up with Brock Bowers, who's like the tight end. Like next year coming out of the draft, he is a really, really highly touted tight end at 6'4", 230 for the Georgia Bulldogs. A guy that I've been watching for the last couple of years. But with this team still in Georgia, he put up this past season 454 yards and 2 touchdowns. So when you're looking at that, it's like, okay, 28 receptions, 454. That's quite substantially less utilization than he got from the other team. But you got to remember some of the weapons that were in this organization. I already talked about Bowers, but that team was one of the best in the country. Now looking at his utilization in 13 of 15 games, he had 10% receptions, 12% of the yardage, 7% of the touchdowns. So not the greatest statistical value, but the size and some of the athleticism is very, very intriguing, even though he still got some of this usage next to Bowers there on that team. I think a sneaky little landing spot here is going to be the Miami Dolphins. That's a team that is lacking in the tight end position. They have Durham Smith, Tanner Connor, and Eric Saubert, and I don't even know if I even pronounced that last one right. And to be honest, I don't even care. In 2023, they lose Adam Shaheen as well, one of their tight ends, and then the other tight ends in 23 and 24. So they're a team that desperately needs a tight end, but like Zach had mentioned, they have lost their first round pick. So they don't draft until the 51st pick of the NFL draft. So looking at that pick, 77 or 84, I think would be kind of in that range where maybe he might go. It might be a little bit later. Like I imagine he might go a little bit, maybe even earlier than that, being possibly a later second, early third round pick. But if he does drop, I'm watching a team like Detroit Lions as well too. They're desperate for a tight end. Looking at their roster right now, obviously trading TJ Hawkinson. The utilization for the tight end position for them was massive last year, soaking up a majority of their touchdowns, especially in the red zone. Right now they have James Mitchell, Shane Zestrel. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. And then both of those are going to be free agents in the 2024 campaign. So they'll have no tight ends on their roster after this upcoming season. So look at them to be a team that goes after a tight end. They're not going to use the pick 48 or 55 for them, I wouldn't imagine, but pick 81 kind of seems right in that wheelhouse for a tight end like Darnell Washington to take a bit of a gamble on this 6'7" behemoth, especially a team that really likes to use the tight end in the red zone.
During the combine, sorry to cut you off there. During the combine, I saw that one team wanted to try him out at tackle.
Well, he's a monster.
Yeah, he's like his greatest attribute is his run blocking. So
yeah,
and he is athletic enough to play the tight end position. So I think one team just, what the heck, let's try him out at tackle, because in this day and age, you have to be quite athletic to play that spot as well. So again, it just kind of speaks to how talented he is in the run game.
I mean, you'd have to be a pretty creative offensive coach, but could you imagine the sets you could use for him if he did play tackle? Like you could be flipping him as a tight end, the tackle within each other, and then especially a team like Detroit that had a heavy run offense last year, and then those creative plays with the tight ends with the meshes and the crosses, especially in the red zone. That's a spot where you could get really creative. I mean, Detroit already has a really, really good offensive line, but the tight end is obviously a position of need, and if you can get that extra body out there to block for for Montgomery, their newest addition. Things can get pretty creative. So it might be a little sneaky pick for the Lions. But I do think a team like Miami that already has a less than stellar tight end room, if you even want to call it that, that's a team that's definitely in need as well.
The Brodacki special.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where you put him on a tackle and you let him rip out there. Going into the quarterback position, here's where what I prefaced last time I think is going to be really important. That this is not the fact I'm saying that he is the second best quarterback in the draft, but I think he's going to be the second best for fantasy. And my number 2 quarterback is CJ Stroud from Ohio State. Coming in at 21 and a half years old, at 6'3", 214 pounds. I think CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in the draft, whether that means like an all-around, all-purpose quarterback. I do have him ahead of Bryce Young as the best quarterback in the draft. Last season, playing 13 games for Ohio State, completed 258 passes on 389 attempts for good enough for 66% and 3,700 yards. Last season, completed 72% of his passes for 4,400 yards. So 2 very good seasons here. 2 very good seasons from Stroud. And then also getting a little bit done on the ground this year too. In 2021, it was not a major attribute of his to be on the ground. But this past season, he got a little bit of 108 yards on 47 attempts. So not a lot, but definitely capable of moving. And one of his kicks in his column is that he's actually very good at passing on the run. So if he gets outside the pocket, gets on the move, he is good at passing the ball. I do like him a lot. But for fantasy, super flex leagues, definitely I'm all over it. Single quarterback leagues, he's not my favorite. He's not the guy with, I think, in the most upside. I'll get into that a little bit in the next one. But I do have CJ Stroud going number 1 overall in this upcoming NFL draft to the Carolina Panthers. They're obviously a team of need, in a position of need at the quarterback position. And the talk since obviously the trade happened with the Chicago Bears was that their quarterback coach has been just praising CJ Stroud's tape and how good of a quarterback and prospect he is. So he's now the betting odds to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and I think that just kind of fits the bill with Carolina. I'm very curious on what they're going to do to surround him with weapons in the draft for this upcoming year. But that's CJ Stroud. I think he is the safer option out of all 3, with obviously some upside. But I'm not going to be selecting him as my number 1 quarterback this year. Armand, your number 2 running back. We've teased this a little bit coming off of your RB3 here. Let's talk about your RB number 2.
All right, my RB2 for this draft is Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, and I think what brought him ahead of Gibbs and why I like him so much is that he has a skill set that translates to being an every down back at the NFL level. And that speaks volumes, especially in fantasy, when you have a guy that's going to be out there for every offensive touch or every offensive snap. It speaks volumes. He's 6 foot, 214 pounds. His 40-yard dash is only a 4.53, but man, he plays faster than that. You can't tell watching his film that he isn't as necessarily as fast as some of those burners, because man, he hits the hole hard, but he's also patient for it as well. He is I think like I said, has the skill set to be the most successful after Robinson, and he drives through contact, and even though he's a contact beast and he's knocking guys over, he's trucking guys, you watch his highlight film and there's a trail of bodies behind some of his highlights. He also has the legs to make a good cut and make a guy lose the tackle. And then also he's able to read the blocks very well. And that's evident in his his ability to cut and make the defender have to hit the block. He's not a home run hitter, but he is capable of scoring from like 40 yards out. So still, like, he can make big plays, he can make big chunk plays. He's just not going to get you that 80-yard touchdown that some of the really high-end running backs are able to make. But he could get you some long runs and lots of touchdowns that way as well. And he routinely gets those chunk plays because of his breaking tackle ability. Apparently, he's also a really smart guy. And that you can tell with his ability to set up blocks as well. And he's a leader. He left Michigan to be near his sister who has a disability. He wanted to be closer to her. And everybody says in the locker room from both his teams that he's a great guy to have in the locker room, and he's a leader. So he's the kind of guy you want to have on your team anyways with that way. So for me, and this is why I know that Jordan would like him, is a comp I had was Javonte Williams from a few years ago. Bingo. Yeah. And then Ramondre Stevenson, maybe a little Najee, and they're not quite the catcher that Najee is, but maybe running the ball kind of similar to that violence that he has when he's running the ball. And I like a guy who runs violently. So that's also what brought him ahead of Gibbs for me.
He's a guy that is strictly landing spot only. Like if he gets a bad landing spot, or the draft capital doesn't reflect what we're talking about him, he could be a guy that just plummeted down. Like who was the guy last year? CJ Spiller. Like CJ Spiller last year was talked about quite substantially as possibly this next big RB, and then the draft capital did not represent that. He was a day 3 pick, and then obviously we know where CJ Spiller sits right now with the Chargers, right? So I'm really curious on what's going to come of him. But
well, and here's another thing to note too: with less touches last year, he put up more yards than he had in his college career, and like he had 202 touches in 2021 for 1,137 yards. 2022, he had 195 touches for 1,359 yards, and he also put up way more receiving yards. Like he's an all around back. I'm pretty high on him.
He's a guy that's if Gibbs goes in front of you, you're not too upset because you can just pick up whichever of the two you want, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Zach, your wide receiver number 2 as we get down to the final remaining wide receivers.
My number 2 wide receiver is Zay Flowers out of Boston College. 5'10", 172 pounds. In my mind, Zay Flowers is the most dynamic wide receiver in the draft. On the season in 2022, he had 12 receptions go for over 20 yards. Zay Flowers is a movable weapon that can make plays from the slot as well as on the perimeter. So he is most likely best suited for the slot, but he can also play on the outside. Last season, he had 78 receptions, just shy of 1,100 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. On a BC team where he was the only offensive weapon to speak of, and some very poor quarterback play there in Phil Jerkovich, formerly of Notre Dame. He's great with the ball in space, and he can threaten all 3 levels in his routes and after the catch. Size, of course, is a concern. Both his height and weight, along with his arm length, aren't ideal. But when he has the ball in his hands, watching him on film, it's very reminiscent of Tyreek Hill. So if you can get Tyreek Hill in the draft, you're certainly doing yourself well. His RAS score compares favorably to Jalen Waddle, Tyler Lockett, and Rondell Moore. And a neat little tidbit on Zay Flowers is very similar to last season, how Jordan Addison got the bag from USC and left Pitt. Zay Flowers reportedly was offered a similar chunk of money, a very lucrative NIL deal, and he turned it down. In my mind, it's similar to what Armand said about Zach Carbonet, where that loyalty and that leadership, I think, is going to shine through with a few teams come draft night. And come draft night, I could see him going as early as 14th overall to the Patriots. Also, teams like the Vikings at 15th overall, the Ravens at 22, and the Vikings at 23. I believe he has visited the Patriots and the Vikings, as well as a few teams later on in the draft, like the Giants and the Cowboys. And if you are a degenerate that likes to gamble, right now, JSN, Jackson Smith Najigba, is the favorite to go, or the favorite receiver to be picked, or he is the favorite to be the first receiver picked at minus 200. But if you put money on Zay Flowers, he is plus 600 to be the first receiver taken. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
You're speaking a lot of degenerates language out there, Zach. Plus 600, might have to go dabble on that one.
Yeah.
Going into the tight end position here, my tight end number 2, and this might be a little controversial, I guess. This has been a back and forth between these two as who they have as their number 1, number 2 tight end, and I really wanted to figure out a way to make this guy my number 1. Actually, for a lot of people, he is the number 1, but for me, number 2 coming in is tight end Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. 6'4", 246 pounds at an age of 23 and a half years old. Now, Dalton Kincaid in 2022 put up 890 yards and 8 touchdowns, which was a really, really nice explosive season. But a little bit of a bit of a later breakout than some of the younger tight ends that break out earlier on in their career. He had a nice 2021 season still, though, 510 yards and 8 touchdowns. So there was a bigger, like, that 2021 was, a lot of people thought was, okay, is this the breakout? Is this the cap? Where is this for Dalton Kincaid? And then obviously the following season, doubling his receptions, just about doubling his yardage, and then still maintaining that 8 touchdown rate was a major success for Dalton Kincaid. This past season, out of the 12 games, he shared 28% of the team receptions, 30% of the team's yardage, and 30% of the team's touchdowns, which is outstanding. And that doesn't even count. He didn't even get 1 touchdown in the absolute drumming of my USC Trojans. That when they ended up beating them 87-24, he didn't get a single touchdown, only 4 receptions for 40 yards that game. So Dalton Kincaid I think is a very, very capable tight end, and I think he's going to have a long, successful career in the NFL. At 6'4", it's a little bit on the, it's not monstrous like some of the 6'6", 6'7" tight ends we've been talking about, but still at 246 is still on that large frame with substantial yardage opportunities, substantial receptions, as well as obviously those near double-digit touchdowns. Now, a team that I think would be a really good fit for him, I think he could be a first rounder. Both these 2 tight ends, I think, very well could go in the first round. But I'm looking at Green Bay, who picked pick 14 and pick 45. They're obviously a team that need wide receivers big time and need tight ends big time, as well as a safety and an edge or other positional needs. And I feel like at 15, they're going to end up going with a wide receiver. So I do think that their pick 45 is possibly somewhere that they could end up getting a tight end. I think they're gonna pass. I think Cincinnati's going to take the other tight end I want to talk about, which is going to leave the Green Bay Packers to select Dalton Kincaid at pick 45 early in the second round. There's a chance that they might trade up and get him maybe 2 if the tight end landscape starts moving a little bit more. But that's definitely a team with several vacated targets from the tight end position. Obviously losing Robert Tonyan, that's made up 12% of the target share. And then the rest of the tight end room is not worth mentioning, kind of like other teams we talked about too. The Detroit Lions are another team, like I said, that are needing in the tight end position, and they have that 48 pick. So it's kind of right around that range. Like I said, 45, 48. So don't be surprised maybe the Lions try and jump up and try and take a tight end, because that is a substantial position of need as well too. But they might end up taking a later one, like I said, that pick 55, maybe even the 81 range. So things to watch for as the tight end positions kind of, I guess, fizzle throughout the NFL draft. Okay, wrapping up all of our positions here, starting at the quarterback, our number 1, and we'll continue on here. Obviously, process of elimination. That leaves me with Anthony Richardson as my number one quarterback for fantasy football. And if you watch his tape, he's a very capable quarterback, but then he makes some really, really, really bad decisions. And that's going to be like his biggest thing to overcome is those decision makings and those poor throws. But just looking at his testing, he was the 99th percentile of the 40. He was the 100th percentile in speed, 100th percentile in explosiveness, the 100th percentile in the vertical jump, as well as the 100th percentile in the broad jump. He absolutely crushed the testing, which skyrocketed him in the NFL draft. Looking at his stats from his previous seasons, the completion rate of 54% and 59% in the last 2 seasons. This past season in 2022, he completed 2,500 yards as well as rushed for 654 yards on 103 attempts. So this rate here is a very risky pick. And I'll tell you that right now, it's a risky pick for the NFL, and it's also a risky pick for fantasy football. He comes in at 6'4", 244 pounds, and age 22, but is an absolute specimen. He's a freak athlete, and he's a guy that could single-handedly win you fantasy football championships. And the big thing is, if he's not a great quarterback in the NFL, is he going to have a long career? And the answer is no. But even if he has 2 seasons of being a terrible passer, but breaking records of rushing like Lamar Jackson had in the first 2 seasons, didn't do a lot of passing, but then did a ton of rushing and then had to, bring that passing ability up the next level. That is what Anthony Richardson, at the very least, is going to bring to the table. You look at quarterbacks in the most recent years, Jalen Hurts, very similar, where that serious rushing platform that everybody wanted and jumped on board, and then the passing came afterwards. Fantasy gold. This past season, you look at Justin Fields, same thing, breaking fantasy records on the rushing, but doing absolutely not a whole heck of a lot in the air yards. You look at Trey Lance, why teams really like Trey Lance, really athletic and could run. So you're looking at these a repeated theme here for fantasy football, and that's that the rushing platform is a cheat code. We've talked about it for years and years and years. Before we have the podcast, while we have the podcast, we keep talking about it. This rushing platform is a cheat code, and that's what Anthony Richardson is going to be able to bring to the table. Does he have a lot to polish? Absolutely. But even if he is a mediocre quarterback at best, he's going to be bringing a substantial amount of fantasy football points your way. And if he hits, his ceiling is so much higher than any other quarterbacks possibly. So is it a risky pick? Most definitely, but that's a risk that I'm definitely willing to take in fantasy football to try and get those couple of years of prestigious points. That's, like Lamar Jackson or even RG3's rookie season. Those were massive, massive fantasy points just because of the rushing floor. So that's why I got him 101.
You know what? I really agree with you with that, especially as a fantasy manager, taking him over CJ Stroud, because you got that rushing platform. And then if he doesn't pan out in the NFL, you're probably going to end up a bottom team again and get another shot at a top end QB if you're in a super flex, right? Yeah. So I think that is kind of in good, rather than getting a decent QB who's going to get you points, and you're going to be stuck in that like forever in the middle rounds, right? So I really like that. And another thing to point out too that's really scary about him is he is pretty much the size of Derrick Henry and faster than him.
It's unbelievable. He's a freak of nature. Like he's a specimen. One thing I didn't mention, I guess, too, is I think he is a lock to go in the 104 position, whether that be the Indianapolis Colts taking him at that 104 or a team trading up to go in the 103. That's kind of as far down as I think he's going to end up going, because there's teams that are connected to the Cardinals at 103 possibly trading up, which would mean they're trading up for a quarterback. I would imagine the team is trading up for Will Levis. So that's kind of where I'm thinking that 103, 104 is kind of banking right where he's going to go. So I think a good landing spot would be for the Colts, because that way Gardner Minshew will start the season. I can't imagine he finishes the season, especially with somebody as athletic as Anthony Richardson. So moving into the 101 of the RBs, Armand, carried away.
All right. Well, we've talked about him enough, but it's Bijan Robinson. He is the 101 undisputed by probably everybody in the world RB in this draft class. I haven't heard a single person have anyone but him as their number one, and you can see why. I started watching his film, and at first I was like, what's all this hype about? But then, like, it's just effortless for him, you know? Like, he is that good. I see the hype. He's got that contact balance. He's got the elite side cut that can just pop over to the next hole. Great vision. And his catching is underrated, actually. I can't believe people aren't talking more about that aspect of it as well, that he is that complete back that can catch it out of the backfield. I was almost more impressed. Like, Gibbs is the guy that everyone talks about being the pass catching back in this class. But some of the catches I saw Bijan make were insane. There's this one where he does a corner route out of the backfield, which, first off, very rare to see out of a running back. And it gets kind of thrown over. So he makes his break to the right, and it gets kind of thrown over his left shoulder rather than his right. And he adjusts so well to it, makes the catch, turns around, and continues up the field. And it was beautiful. Like, I was like, man, like, that is like a catch that a lot of wide receivers can't make. And Bijan made that catch. So I think we need to talk a little bit more about that going forward too. The one knock is, like, he's not that twitchy guy. Like, he's not twitchy, but he is decisive. And when he makes the moves, it's electric. It's fast. I really like him a lot. I am high on him, and I would say, like, you know how excited I was about Kenneth Walker last year. I'm as excited or more about Bijan this year. And the comps for me were like Breece Hall, who can do it all, but he's better than Breece Hall coming out. Saquon Barkley, a prime Todd Gurley, Kareem Hunt when he was the bell cow in Kansas City, like those types of guys that like can do it all and run over a guy, but also make a guy miss when he's going to tackle him. And he has speed. He runs a 4.46 40. Player Profiler, which is one of the sites I use, has his comp as Marshawn Lynch, which is pretty good. That's a pretty darn good comp, if I don't say so. So yeah, Bijan Robinson.
I think the best thing I heard about him the other day was that he's not elite at anything, but he's very good at everything.
Yeah.
There's not one attribute he has where it's just like, you are the best at this, or you are like, 100th percentile or 90th percentile at this, but you are like at the ceiling of everything, and you're just well rounded. So this is why I'm so curious to see where he lands, because there were some mock drafts that had him going to Seattle. So like, Seattle, could you imagine like him and Walker there? Like, it would plummet both fantasy their value. But it'd be really interesting to see two like supreme talents in one backfield. But the teams obviously like the Bills that are being mocked, the Bengals if they move on from Joe Mixon. And even right now I think the number one team, if I'm not the number one or number two on the betting, is the New England Patriots. And I'm curious to see if something like that happens. Then
what about the Eagles? They got a good draft spot for it.
Yeah, I saw a mock of them going at the 10 spot of the Eagles. So there's such a wide range. Like, he's going to be a first rounder. I'm guessing towards the tail end, that 25th, 22nd round, in that range. But it's going to be interesting to see teams that might end up trading up in front of other teams that are rumored to be in on Bijan.
Yeah, and like you said, like that's why my film watching, I was like, what is this hype at first? Because like you said, he's not elite at anything, but he is great at everything. Yeah.
Zach, do you want to take it away on your 101 wide receiver?
Sure thing. Wide receiver number one, for me, this is pretty easy. This fella has been the number one wide receiver or rather on a lot of draft boards for over a year now, and that is Jackson Smith-Njigba of Ohio State. He is 6'1", 200 pounds. And if Jordan Addison isn't the most intriguing wide receiver on this list, then it has to be JSN. And that's because JSN really only had 1 year of college production, but it was a stellar season. This past year, 2022, he only played in a handful of games, and his season was cut short because of a hamstring injury. But in 2021, he put up 95 receptions for just shy of 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns. That was on the Ohio State team that also had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And according to a lot of people that know a lot more than I do, he was the best of those 3 receivers. And both of those guys went early in the first round of last year's draft.
I think he was even one of them that quoted, like, I remember it was Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. They asked him, and he said no, like, he was the best that year. So, like, even coming from the players, they were quoted saying that.
And in similar sentiments, Brian Hartline, the wide receiver coach at Ohio State, was on Bussin' with the Boys. It's a podcast with a couple of former NFL players. And they were saying, and he was saying that Brian Hartline was saying that of all the players he's coached at Ohio State, JSN is the number 2 wide receiver. The number 1 wide receiver would be Marvin Harrison Jr., who will be at the top of this list come next year. But JSN, he'll be the quarterback's best friend. He'll be playing out of the slot, and he'll be picking up a lot of easy, quick receptions. Isn't as fast as you would like your number 1 wide receiver to be. He had a 4.52 40, but he has very impressive short area quickness, and his 3-cone was superb. I don't think he's getting the hype that he necessarily deserves because of the injury. At this time last year, people were over the moon about JSN and the potential that he had. So it's very likely that had he had a similar season this year to what he had in 2021, he would be getting a lot more hype. His RAS score compares favorably to Robert Woods, Julian Edelman, as well as Cooper Kupp. I could see him going as early as pick 12 to the Texans, where they would pair him up with whatever quarterback they pick number 2 overall. I would also love to see him go to the Patriots at 14 overall. And I could see his being drafted no later than pick 20 with the Seahawks. He's taken a visit to the Patriots, and I believe he's also taken a visit to the Seahawks. So if that's any indication.
Yeah, he's going to be super, super intriguing. I think right now, like, he's kind of the 102, if not maybe the 103. But I'm curious to see what happens following the draft on what happens to his draft class his draft stock, sorry, because right now you could argue he's probably the 102 in dynasty picks right now. But obviously if he gets that premier landing spot, it's going to be real juicy for him. I'm going to conclude things here with my tight end. My tight end 1, and that's Michael Mayers. Am I pronouncing that right, Zach? I know you're obviously a huge Notre Dame guy, but the one reason why I had him kind of hemming and hawing whether he be the 101 or the 102 at the tight end position was because he came in and tested quite poorly during his testing period there. The vertical and the broad jump he finished in at the 67th percentile, and then the vertical at the 37th percentile. So a little bit underwhelming. He does come in at 6'5", 249 pounds, a nice large stature, and at a young age of 21, turning 22 shortly. Coming out of Notre Dame, he had a really, really good season in 2021 and that breakout campaign, playing 12 games. Actually, you know what? Even his 2020 season, you could say, was his breakout campaign. Because in that year he played 12 games, 42 receptions for 450 yards and 2 touchdowns, which for a rookie is quite a good season. But then coming in 2021 in the second season, 71 receptions, 840 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then this past season, a little bit of a regression in the receptions and the yardage at 67 and 809, but then an increase in touchdowns at 9. That utilization coming in at 33% of the yards, 34% of the receptions, as well as 39% of the touchdown rate. It's quite high, especially for a tight end playing 12 or 13 games for that team. He was the clear-cut one, in my opinion, until following the draft, and then obviously not the draft, sorry, the testing in the combine, and coming in a little bit poorly in that combine is where I think he kind of comes into a 1A, 1B with Kincaid, and there's a little bit of discussion there, but I still think he is a lead tight end, and I think he will be the first tight end drafted in the NFL. The team I have him going to is the Cincinnati Bengals. They only have picked 28 in the first round. So I'm thinking that if they want to get this done, they might have to trade up a little bit, but there is a good chance that he could fall to 28 at the back end of the first. He is a first round talent, but I've seen mocks of him going even rather earlier than the middle. Like I've seen him, or than the late. Sorry, I've been seeing him going in the middle of the first round. So very interesting to follow. But Cincinnati obviously being a team needing a tight end as of right now, Devin Asiasi, the former Patriots draft pick, and Irv Smith are their go-to tight ends right now. So Irv Smith had all the high praise and the high potential, but unfortunately couldn't stay healthy so far. But I think this would be a really good and fun landing spot for a premier talent. So.
Hey, I got to talk about my dark horse, Jordan. Okay, my dark horse RB here, my number 4 guy, Israel Abinaconda. And he's my dark horse, even though he's my number 4, because nobody's talking about him. But he's a running back out of Pittsburgh, and he's got a full toolbox. He's got a BMI of 30. He's a great size for an RB. He is 5'10", 216 pounds, runs a 4.4, 4.40, and on his pro day, he ran a 4.39, which you can read into that what you want. But he's got speed. And he's got a full toolbox. Like he runs through contact. He hits guys hard. He's kind of like Zach Charbonnet in that way, just not quite as violent, but he still runs pretty violently. And he had a breakout year last year. And he's only 20 years old yet. He's not even 21 yet. And he put up 1,431 yards last year with 21 touchdowns, 146 receiving yards. He's a guy who can do it all. Him and Zach Charbonnet are kind of similar in that regard to me. Just there's less known about Israel here, otherwise known as Izzy to some. But he has the potential to be an every down back in the league and have a full long for an RB career. So I like him a lot actually, and yeah, that's why he's right behind Gibbs. It's the Gibbs and Charbonnet in that tier 2, and then tier 3, he's like that first guy up that like is just on the precipice of tier 2.
Yeah, putting this perspective, like you're not gonna draft him as the 4th running back off the board, but he's a guy that when the running backs start to move, you're gonna kind of have him pegged as a guy that you want to try and sneak in late rounds, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
For those at home that are new to Dynasty, and just because we have them in a specific order doesn't mean that's the order we're going to draft them in, right? It's the order that we like them. So,
yeah.
Concluding this episode here, we'll wrap things up with Armand's Ice Cold Hot Take. It seems kind of fitting the way this episode worked out, and which his hot take is here as it pertains to some of the rookies. So, without further ado, we'll get to Armand's hot take.
You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. I'm on fire.
All right, so my hot take this episode, and I think it's pretty spicy, is this QB class is getting pretty hyped up. But I'm here to tell you, hold your horses, step on the brakes a little bit. We just had a stinker of a QB class last year, and I think that kind of shifted the window a little bit here. And we see these guys, and we're thinking they're just because they're better than last year, it's a great QB class. But I don't think they are as slam dunk as people think, as much as the 2020 and 2021 QB classes were. I think those two classes are going to outshine them their entire career. I mean, you got Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. Keep me going here, guys. Like, there's so many QBs in those 2 years there that I don't see this class being as slam dunk as those guys. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, like all these guys, we're hyped up and they've shown success at the NFL level already. And you look at even what we said about Jordan's number one guy, he might not even be in the league in 5 years, like he is a freak athlete. And I hope he's in the league in 5 years because he's going to be fun to watch if he's successful. But man, like his completion percentage, his touchdown to interception ratio, he threw 17 TDs and 9 interceptions last year. Like that's not numbers you want to see out of a QB, right? He's raw like Willis last year. He's just a better athlete than Willis, and that's why he's so hyped up right now. And I'm ready to jump on him in Superflex Dynasty as well because of the reward that you could get if he hits is massive. But if he could fall flat on his face because he's shown that he makes bad decisions. And even though we say that's an easy fix, guys don't always fix it. And then we look at other guys like Will Levis is kind of similar to Richardson, and he's got all this talent in the world, but he makes dumb mistakes sometimes. And like just some guys aren't able to learn, if that makes sense. And I'm a little worried about that with Will Levis as well, that he's just he doesn't have necessarily the numbers and completion percentage, and he's a little bit of a risky pick. Hendon Hooker being a little bit older, he's not super athletic. He's decent. And then Bryce Young, there's question marks about him with his size. Like how effective is he going to be with his height? He has shown that he is a smart QB. He can throw the ball and everything, right? So the only one that, as you noticed, I'm not knocking a CJ Stroud. He's the only one that I see as being a for sure long-term starter in the NFL. The other guys, there's risk there in taking them, and they're not for sure slam dunks. And like I said, I think the 2020 and 2021 QB classes are gonna be the guys that outshine them their entire career. When it's all said and done, they're gonna have the Super Bowls, they're gonna have the MVPs over this draft class.
Oh boy, this one, I was thinking about it in the scheme of like, would I invest in rookie cards, trying to get these quarterbacks? Like last year, I bought a ton more football cards. This year, not so much because there's always the big quarterbacks. But the big QBs, I don't know. It's enticing, Armand. There's a lot of hype coming around them. It's been we've been deprived of a quarterback class the last couple of years. But I mean, even looking back to, was it 2018 draft where we had Baker Mayfield go 101, and then shortly after that we had Sam Darnold. We had I can't remember his name from the UCLA.
Rosen.
Yeah, Josh Rosen. Then Lamar went 32. Like that was a really enticing, and then Josh Allen, I think, went pick 11, if I remember correctly. But that was a big QB class too. And really, we're still talking about 2.5 players. Like the other, we just talked about insiders and headlines, the fact that they landed a backup position. So it'll be intriguing. Like it's easy to say that based on their projections or based on their collegiate production that they should be an NFL hit. But we've seen lots in the last couple of years where those names obviously they just don't pan out. It's like, look at Zach Wilson. Team drafted him so high, and within 2 seasons, they've already named him the backup, and they don't even have a starting quarterback right now. So things can swing quick for those quarterbacks. But we do know that in fantasy football, when you hit those quarterbacks, it's always a good feeling that you have them for the duration of time. Like look at Trevor Lawrence's rookie season was so bad, and then this past year he took on that trajectory in the second half of the season and kept carrying it through the playoffs. So things can happen quick in the NFL, and that's why there's new sets of guys drafted every single year, and there's always going to be quarterbacks. Like just wait till next year when you have Caleb Williams coming in from USC, and going to be the new hotness, and there's obviously lots of other guys that'll be coming through. So things can move quick. Anything you guys want to add here before we wrap this one up? I know it's obviously a long one, but we had a lot to talk about today.
No, man. Like let's get the draft season here. I want to see the draft. I want to start drafting in Dynasty. Like let's go. Let's get this moving.
Hey,
can we speed time up somehow?
friendly update for everybody at home for our Dynasty League. Everybody's now officially paid up, so trading is now open. We're gonna get wheels moving. Armand already hit my DMs. He's already hit my DMs. He's negotiating. He wants one of my Detroit Lions. So
give me Monra.
Yeah, we must sign God. We'll leave it at that.
I could settle with Jameson Williams.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Done. Anyways, that'll do it for our episode number 84 as we introduce some rookies into the NFL prospects here and we get a little dynasty caps on. So take care, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.